Okay, time to rein in our content. So I've got a nice background image on the back, but this text is all the way on top of it. I would like to move everything down. And to do that, I need to understand a few things about how I can style using the box model, which you have been looking at in the Khan Academy already. To more easily visualize what we're dealing with here, I'm going to click up here on this H1 text, which has the word CSS Zen Garden in it. Right click or control click and inspect. And then you'll see as I mouse over in this bottom area, I get some highlights depending on what I have under my selection. So if I move up to see the H1, I'm just going to click it for a moment. You can see that the H1 element, even though the text it ends, right at the end of Zen Garden, the actual element goes across the entire page. So this is what is known as a block level element. And to just reveal what you already know, CSS Zen Garden is an H1. The beauty of CSS design is an H2. The H1, if you put an H1 tag followed by an H2 tag, the H2 will go underneath the H1, right? It doesn't go next to the H1. So this is something that probably you're used to at this point from making tags, but I just wanted to call it out specifically to you because this is the behavior. The reason why they behave this way is because the browser treats these as a block. So this H1, even though the text is not long enough to fill up the whole width of the page, as we can see, the blue and the orange go all the way across. The browser understands that this H1 takes up a whole block of the page. That is the entire width of the page. In addition, the browser has assigned some default margins, the things that are colored in orange. Space inside the blue area but outside the text is padding. So now we've got margin and padding. If I scroll down on the right hand side here, it will show me a picture of the box model where it shows me what the margins are. So it says I have 21.44 pixels of margin on the top and bottom, and then there's no border, and it's got some default amount of padding that's not set. Actually, it's probably 0. And then inside here are the dimensions of the actual H1 element itself. So we can affect these numbers. And we can do them. We can do this by editing here, or we can edit in brackets and refresh, just to show you that you can make little tiny edits in here. It doesn't stick inside your source code, but it's a nice way to test stuff. So say that I'm inside my H1 rule, and I just, for a minute, I want to affect the margin. Margin. Let's change it to something bigger. 4 EM. Now if I mouse over, I'm looking at the H1 right now, you can see, wow, my orange area just got a lot bigger. And it had the effect of pushing the text, right? So I've added some margin to the top and it's pushed the text down. Interesting. So now what about padding? If I increase all the padding at the same time, I can maybe say 2 EMs of padding. Great. I just saw something jump up there. Let's see what it looks like in the box model. So now that green area, which we could not previously see, that's the padding I just added, 2 EMs of padding. Now, I'm using the big default properties for margin and padding, which affect all sides of margin and padding equally. But I can do more specific things. So for example, this doesn't have to be margin. It could be just the top margin. So I could say margin dash top, and it will only affect the top one. Now if I go here, I can see the top margin is much bigger, but the bottom margin stayed as it was. If I say that this is only the padding, let's say on the bottom, I can say padding dash bottom. And then if I mouse over again, I can see that only the padding underneath the text, that is the bottom padding, has been modified. So this is some interesting features. Margin and padding are actually a way that you can move text around on the page, because you can see the effect of adding all that margin at the top, that orange margin, it's pushing the text down. So let's take that to a huge extreme here and add a whole bunch of margin to the top. I could do it in M's, which is related to the size of the font. Or in this case, because I'm dealing with a background image and I kind of know how big it is, I can also do it in pixels. So let's say 500 pixels of space on the top is plenty big to move it down oh, I can't see it though because I have attachment fixed, to move it down underneath the mountains. So now I'm running, so this is great. And if I look at this in the inspector again for just a second, scroll it into view. Here's all that margin I added at the top. So this is the moment where I realized that it's not going to work for me to have a fixed background image, because then as I scroll, it's just going to scroll on top of the mountains again, and so that's no good. But let's see what it looks like if I take the fixed background image off. And I just added 500 pixels of margin to the top of the H1. So let's do a couple things in brackets. Let me take this off and say scroll. And then I'm just going to put a little comment to us that scroll is the default. And then for the H1, let me add a bunch of margin to the top, just like I did in the browser. Because as soon as I refresh over here, my margin that I had so carefully added is gone, because it's just temporary. So let's make it more permanent by saying margin top 500 px. Save, refresh. Aha! Now we're cooking. So this is looking a lot better. We'll continue our work with margin and padding in the next video.